Hi everyone, and welcome to the Virgo August 2021 self-connection reading. This is I Am Illuminated Tarot and meaning-based spiritual coaching services. I am Lauren. Hi and welcome. So this is one of 3 connection readings that I complete each month for each sign that focuses on bringing awareness to some specific aspect of yourself. So bringing awareness to your internal, unique, authentic self, how that connects to your external environment, as well as how that connects to the energy of love and interpersonal connection, interpersonal relationships. So, Virgo, let's get right into your reading. I am going to utilize the Triad of Engagement, which is a coaching tool that I've developed in my practice that focuses on utilizing the 3 very basic principles of curiosity, courage, and contemplation to help unlock awareness to both your internal, unique, authentic self and to show how you can connect that self in an authentic way with your external environment and to others to be able to find your place and purpose and to discover emotional fulfillment. So this reading specifically, and we actually have a card that popped right out, so I'm going to talk about that in just a minute here. But basically, we are going to be looking at, in this reading, and the reason why I actually have this as the readings that start the month, we move into the spiritual connection readings in the second week of the month, and your love connection readings moving into the end of the month. Because self-connection and bringing awareness to our unique, internal, authentic self is really where engagement and connection to our place and purpose starts. We can't know where we belong until we know ourselves. So there is some truth to that saying of know thyself or know thyself first. So for the first card that I just pulled that just leapt out the deck on me here for you guys is going to focus on the principle of curiosity. So curiosity helps us to basically shine that beautiful spotlight of openness and receptivity and optimism towards what we don't know, or seeing something in a new light to gain a new perspective towards ourselves. Oftentimes by this point in our lives, depending on how old you are, but if you're older than being, let's say, a small child, the older we get, the more we get used to shining curiosity outward. But it's equally important to do that and shine curiosity inward, because we are also learning about ourselves on a continual basis as much as we are learning about our external environment. So the beneficial qualities of curiosity really are tapping us into that sense of awe and wonder, again, towards, in this reading specifically, ourselves. What have we already presupposed about ourselves at this point? So wherever you are in your life's journey, what have you already presupposed about yourself? What have you already told yourself, this is me and it can't change? Or there's a part of myself that I would love to bring out, but I can't because every time I have in the past, it's led to something negative. Or simply just being totally disconnected with yourself, and the thought alone in connecting with your unique internal self is a little scary, where you don't want to be curious. Instead, you are a little pessimistic, and instead of being open, you're a little closed, and instead of being receptive, you're non-receptive, because you know that there's stuff in there that once you start to bring awareness to, is going to have to be dealt with. When we shine the light of curiosity inward, there's always going to be that element of kind of like anytime you've been anywhere where it's been low lighting and darkness for quite some time, when you turn on the light, the first thing you are is kind of blinded. Blinded by the fact of what you see. And a lot of times what we see first are the negative things. We see the flaws. We see the mistakes. We see the parts that, so this would be a good example of being at a bar and all of a sudden the lights come on at the end of the night and you look around and the people that you had seen don't look the way that you had kind of intuited them to look like. Or you notice all of a sudden that the bar you've been having your hands on the whole time is dirty. It's sticky mess. Or that, but the reverse, obviously, then as you become used to the light, is that it also shows you things that you would never have otherwise seen that are also equally beautiful. So that really cool picture on the wall that you had missed when you walked in the door, or the fact that the person you were speaking to actually has, bright purple hair and you hadn't noticed that before, and it's really cool. So that's kind of how we're looking inward at ourselves. That no, we don't know everything, and yes, we may find things that are a little scary or a little, I haven't looked at that part of myself in quite some time, but this is also where we have to step into that place of optimism with curiosity, that we may have the perspective that some aspect of ourselves is not perfect or shouldn't be shared with others, but that in reality, the more we shine the light on it, the more we get a chance to see the beauty in it, and that in reality, this is what is actually meant to be shared and opened up to your external environment. So, after that long explanation, Virgo, I felt like you guys needed to hear that. We have surrender to play. And it says, take a break from overthinking a goal. Do something fun. Play is a time of recreation and rejuvenation. And with this card, since we're talking about curiosity, we are going to build a question around this card for you to keep in mind for the rest of the month that is really meant to continue to keep that spotlight of curiosity pointed inward to bring awareness to some aspect of yourself that needs to be basically addressed. And addressed so that you can start to bring that out and work with it. So, surrender to play. When we're thinking about play in general, often as we get older, and I am guilty of this myself, we can lose we not only lose touch with the importance of play, but we lose sight of just how play really can elevate our experience, actually. So we tend to focus more on the things that we feel we have to do, the things that we feel are labeled not only by ourselves but by others as more important than just a frivolous sense of play. And play can actually, when we think of young children, play is very integral to development. Play is where children get a chance to, through enjoyment, through doing things that keep their attention and keep them engaged, they get to learn about themselves. So they get to learn what they're physically capable of. They get to learn what they're mentally capable of. And they also get to learn on an emotional and a spiritual level as well. They get to find what brings them joy, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And play is just as important then as it is in your adult life as well as you get older. Because it's not like we just stop growing. That we go from childhood into adulthood and then at some point we just turn an age and that's it. We don't grow from that point forward. And if you notice, we are, even just in our physical bodies, we're always changing. We're always evolving. And that happens too in our emotional and our spiritual and our mental experience as well. So we're still growing at any point, no matter whether you're 18 or whether you're 89. You are still in a process of change and growth. And play is just as integral then, when you're younger, as it is at 89. Because when we are doing something that holds our interest, that captivates us, that allows us to test out new parts of ourselves and actually multiple parts of ourselves at the same time. So both our physical and our mental and our emotional, our spiritual, and it engages all of those things together. That's when we get a chance to be, again, really kind of actually break into the concept of curiosity and really get that element of openness, bringing that back into our experience of, hey, this is fun, this feels good, and wow, I'm open to something new. I didn't, in playing this new game, so to speak, or in just going out and playing, doesn't have to look like you're playing with blocks or, learning how to ride a bike the way that a child would. Play as you get older changes. It changes into anything where you get a chance to lose yourself. And this can be with or without people. So this could look like, for you, a sense of play might be picking up a new hobby. Like, for instance, I actually have a friend right now who's picking up a new hobby. He's picking up hang gliding, parasailing. Now, when I get a chance to go and see what he's posting in his social media and what he's sharing to everybody, oh my gosh, it looks like so much fun, and he's just having a blast. And of course, in doing this, he's learning about himself. He's learning on a physical level new challenges to what he's capable of, but there's also a mental component of having to learn how to deal with the anxiety of literally going up to a cliff's edge and leaping off, of how to handle the emotional pressure and stress, as well as the extreme highs that you get from being able to have that sense of freedom of flight. And then there's the spiritual component of suddenly having a new perspective on the world. And so just in picking up this hobby, he's opening himself up to another level of self-awareness, as well as also seeing now where perhaps there's some element of himself that he hadn't realized fits very well into this type of, let's say, hobby. And that maybe he might realize that this is something that he wants to end up teaching to others, or that in realizing he's very good at dealing with the stress of release of jumping off of a cliff and just letting things go, that he can help apply that to other areas of his life and realize, wow, I have an easier time dealing with this type of stress than most people, and I'm going to see how I can better apply that into my authentic engagement with my everyday experience. So this is where play becomes really important. That sometimes we think that, now play can also look like you just going out with your friends for a fun night out. Or play can look like you sitting down and getting lost in writing a book that you've always wanted to write. Or you name it. Play can look like anything that you get lost in, where there's that sense of time goes by and it's almost like somebody has to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, earth to so-and-so. And you're like, whoa, what? It's something that is enjoyable, but also something that at the same time keeps you engaged because you're continuing to grow and learn about yourself. And so this can also look like taking a trip someplace or going for a hike. There's limitless possibilities. So now that we kind of understand where play is so integral, even in our adult life, the question I would say, since this is the first card that came up, and this is really what you're being asked to, this is the key to helping unlock some part of yourself that really I think has been lying dormant, maybe blocked, that needs to come out again to help you engage authentically with your external environment, is where have you not been surrendering to play? Where have you been holding yourself back? And when you think about, in let's say just the more recent years within your life, depending on how old you are, but again, most of you are going to be beyond the age of 18. So when you think about what has brought you that sense of play in the past, and where have you either not been engaging in that recently. So let's say that traveling is that sense of play for you. You love, maybe you spent the last 7 years every year traveling to some new continent. And that was your sense of release. That was you getting out there to be able to engage on an authentic level, to learn new things, and to come back feeling refreshed, revitalized, and realizing something about yourself each time you went someplace new. But you haven't traveled in quite some time. And this could be obviously due to the pandemic, but this could also be simply that you got caught up in having to work long hours, and maybe taking that 2 or 3 week vacation or maybe even longer, just wasn't approved, or there just wasn't time for it. Or, maybe you had a hobby that you've lapsed on, or you stopped going to hang out with friends, and that was always your kind of release, was to go out with these people, and you got this chance to engage in lively conversation and to experience a new place, maybe to eat, or a new cultural aspect of where you live, and you haven't been doing that. And why? So when we ask ourselves questions, we start with the overarching question. And then we use curiosity to go a step further and a step further. So yes, this is meant to be a one question for you for the month, but then we have to continue as we move through the month to keep up with, okay, so where have I not been surrendering to play? What is something that I have given up, that I have not been participating in, that maybe I had in the past? Sorry guys, I need to shift here. And then, as you're starting to think about that and you're bringing awareness to that aspect of self, then to say, well, why have I stopped doing that? So if I have stopped traveling, and let's say pandemic aside, why did I stop traveling before the pandemic? Was it because I felt that I had to work and that work took priority? And now where has that blocked some aspect of myself? So then the third question is going to be, well, what part of yourself were you really engaging with the most when you were at play in, let's say, traveling, that you have since kind of allowed to go dormant? Because that's going to be the key to where basically spirit is kind of working with you right now to say, you lost sight a little bit. The journey is meant to be enjoyed. And it's meant to be enjoyed from our unique perspective. No one can live your life for you. That's a truism. No one can enjoy your life for you. And I think sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we forget that we can't seek fulfillment and enjoyment in our life from external things. That has to come from within, because no one else is living our life. Only we are living our lives. And so if we are not feeling like we have this kind of sense of play and fun in our life, well, that is coming from us specifically. Now, granted, there's always going to be external circumstances beyond our control, but we can still find and change our perspective in the moment to create little moments that feel like this for us. But bringing it back to the point of curiosity. So for you, for self-awareness for the month of August, it's all about, where have you not been playing? And then asking yourself, why have you not been playing? And then asking yourself, well, what part of yourself was unlocked when you chose to play previously? So if you were traveling, why did you want to travel? What did that unlock about yourself uniquely? Or if you, let's say your hobby was like my friend, it was parasailing. And let's say you gave that up. Well, why did you start to do that in the first place? What did going through those motions and choosing to follow that hobby, what did that bring out about you? What need did it fill? What ability did it highlight? What dream did it get you closer to achieving or feeling like you were touching? Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and pull a spirit animal oracle card for the concept of courage. So courage builds on the principle of curiosity. Courage is where we get a chance to tap into courage, to make those bold, brave decisions, to take action on our own authentic behalf. Meaning this is where we have to sometimes make those tough decisions to say, I'm going to say yes to me and my needs and my desires and my dreams and what gets me closer to feeling good. What gets me closer to feeling emotionally connected and fulfilled to myself. And that may seem like, well, why would that be difficult? Well, because sometimes that means when we say yes to ourselves, we're saying no to somebody else or no to something else. And that's something we always do have to keep in mind. But the more we act in accordance with our authentic self, the more we move away from being truly, and the more we do it with awareness. We always want to know the why behind our actions. When we lose sight of the why, that's how we become disengaged. When we decide to simply, and this can be on the smallest level, this can be simply making that decision to stop at the fast food place on the way home because you're just not engaged and you're just tired and you're like, I'm just gonna stop here, even though I know the food's bad for me and it makes me feel bad, ultimately I'm just gonna do it. Instead of taking that moment to be aware to say, you know, I have options for food, for nourishing my body. I could choose to be lazy and just out of just almost like not even thinking, just stop by this place because it's something I've done on autopilot for years now. Or I can be aware of my choice and realize, okay, I could do this and the consequences of that are me feeling bad about myself because I'm not going to feel good after eating this bad food. Or I can go ahead and either swing by the store and pick up something that's kind of half ready made that I can kind of still prep fresh ingredients around. Or I might have a slightly healthier fast dining option that's just down the street and I can get an equal amount of time. But because I'm now aware of my choice and I'm aware of what is working more authentically with keeping me healthy and feeling good, I can stop and say, oh, why would I stop here when I can stop there? Now, it seems like that's such a simple, basic principle or decision to make, but ultimately, that small, tiny decision made with awareness to yourself and taking your highest self into consideration is enough to really make a big difference. It's the difference between feeling good physically that then leads to you feeling good emotionally and feeling good mentally and even feeling good spiritually versus not, versus feeling almost guilty after eating a bad meal and then physically feeling drained and tired because you didn't eat nourishing food. And then, again, kind of beating yourself up. And it's interesting how just one small change in your decision-making process can open one side of you up to, again, your highest potential, and one can lead to kind of this negative thought loop of guilt and shame or just a complete lack of awareness and just feeling physically fatigued as well as mentally fatigued and not quite understanding where that's coming from. So, but then of course, courage comes into play for much larger decisions. So this can be making that decision to leave a secure 9-to-5 job to follow a passion project or a side business. This could be making the hard decision to walk away from a committed relationship because it is no longer supportive of you and your highest potential. There's all kinds of decisions, large and small, but every decision involves some element of courage. So even the smallest decision, like deciding where to stop on the way home from work for a quick dinner, can involve some element of courage. Maybe it's just that courage to drive just that little bit farther, or that courage to admit to yourself that it's time to start eating a little bit healthier. It's amazing how courage is relative to the individual. So this is where we really have to learn to release our comparison with others as far as the actions that we choose to take. Because for what might be easy for one person, for somebody who is, let's say, a health nut, who eats healthy all the time and has all the healthy places mapped out, and for them to make a choice to know where to eat and what they want after work, it's very easy compared to somebody who perhaps is just starting the journey of self-awareness about maybe nutrition. And for them, it's a difficult decision because they don't know where to find the quick, healthy options. And these are the things that we don't realize, that we're each on our own individual journey. It's why it's equally important that if you are on your journey and you do have something, like let's say you are that extreme, healthy guru person, that you are sharing that with others, because the person who is just starting that journey will need a teacher, will need a mentor, will need to be able to find the information necessary to help them start to make those courageous decisions. So you can kind of see how this all connects with the more you engage authentically with yourself and live into your highest potential, the more you start to find the places where you can also help teach and elevate the collective. Okay, so interesting. There's actually two cards that came out. I'd missed, one was just down here. So I'm going to take both for you, Virgo. So you have Giraffe Spirit, and it says, see the big picture, number 29, breaking down to an 11. And we have Elephant Spirit, learn from the past. And it's number 25, breaking down to a 7. Two really powerful cards here, Virgo. So when we're thinking about taking action this month, and when we're leading with the question of where have you not been engaging with play, and what part of yourself has been being blocked because of that, then we can look at this and go, okay, so then where perhaps in taking action have you really missed the bigger picture? I think when we think of the numbers, so the number 29 breaks down to a number 11. The number 11 in numerology is a very powerful number. It's a portal between basically us and the divine, us and the spiritual knowledge. It's for us to be able to see beyond what is currently, to see what can be. And so there is this element of, see the big picture. That's kind of what that's in reference to. And so there is this quality, I feel like, for you guys that perhaps, this is a good kind of a reason to have behind taking action to play. That maybe you've lost sight that there's a bigger picture out there. Perhaps you guys have been very narrow focused. That's kind of what I'm feeling right now, is that you've been very hyper focused on something specific, whether it's work, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a side project, but that you've been so hyper focused that you've forgotten kind of the reason why you originally focused on that aspect of your life, why you gave up play for something. So let's say you gave up traveling for a job, and you started to work long hours, and you started to really, work. And what you're being asked to do now is, as you start to shift away from being so hyper focused on work and so hyper focused on maybe putting in these long hours, to step back and say, okay, well, maybe I gave up traveling for work. The original why behind that was so that I could actually have more money to travel more. And now it's kind of like that aha moment of, oh shoot, I've gotten so far away from what I had originally intended for myself and focusing so much there that now things are out of balance. Now that part of myself, so let's say that part of yourself when you went traveling, that was engaged, that part of meeting new people and, getting to interact with a new culture, it's been lying dormant. That part of yourself that just wants to taste new food and see basically tapping into the beauty that is around you and that exists everywhere. And so you haven't been tapping into beauty. And that part of yourself has been laying dormant. And so your work has, when you think about it, you've been so focused on work and so focused on all of this. Where have you lost connection to beauty? And what did that connection to beauty originally help bring out in yourself? Maybe you've actually started to get a little depressed. And maybe in not allowing yourself to tap into the beauty, to the awe and wonder of everything outside of your front door, so to speak, that you've also, other aspects of yourself have suffered. Perhaps you were one who loved to, write about your experiences and you haven't been writing. So your level of creativity has dropped. And maybe you, in addition to that, at your happiest, were also engaging in interacting with other people. But now, since you kind of have lost that sense of that connection to beauty, you've become kind of closed. And so you're just going through the same day-to-day motions. You go to work, you focus, you work hard, and you come home, but you're not actually focusing on what you used to love, which is the interactions with others that used to kind of uplift and get you motivated. And so what we don't realize is that when we get too hyper-focused in some aspect and we're not actually tapping into this element of play or some element of release for ourselves that unlocks elements of ourself in new and different ways, everything within us can suffer. And we don't realize just like how much that can actually kind of blind us to where we are not now living as our highest potential self. We're not living authentically. We are no longer engaging with others, even though that's something we so valued previously. We are not going out and journaling about our experiences and maybe even blogging and sharing them with others. And suddenly this creative aspect of ourself is suffering. And so this is where I think you guys are being asked to see that bigger picture, to realize, where have you been so focused on something that has actually become detrimental to you living authentically, to sharing all of these parts of yourself, and also to living into what you value. So if you had originally started to work longer hours and work harder so that you could save more money, so that you could travel more, and suddenly now you haven't traveled in quite some time and all you've been doing is working, well, work never held intrinsic value for you before, outside of just how it could get you closer to doing more traveling. And so now you're not acting in alignment with your value, with what you value. And that is the quickest way to become disengaged from our place and purpose, but also just disengaged with what we're doing. And it's also the quickest way to actually become depressed. So, in taking action, giving yourself that permission to say yes to yourself and no to perhaps others or your place of work or wherever, it's time to step back and see the bigger picture. And Spirit wants you to see the bigger picture. That's why this number 11 is coming through to remind you of what is beyond just your immediate environment. That there will be a time again outside of this pandemic when you can travel. In fact, you could probably even travel now. Travel doesn't have to be getting on board a plane and traveling halfway around the world. Travel can simply be getting into a car and seeing a new place close by that you've never been to. You know, I'm often shocked by how many people I meet where they live close to some, you know, neat some attraction, whether it's natural, like a national park, or whether it's cultural, like a really neat museum that has a great art collection, or whether it's, you know, a place that's known for great food or something along those lines, and where they have just never tapped into that, never gone there. Oh yeah, I just never could find the time. And so there's that quality here of maybe we might be restricted on doing something fully, but it doesn't mean that we can't actually find other simple ways, again, kind of going back to the baby steps, other ways to make those decisions to start unlocking that aspect of play in us again. So maybe you do want to get into parasailing, but maybe you don't. Maybe it costs a bunch of money and you had to step back from that because it just really wasn't in your budget. It wasn't affordable at the time for you. Well, there are other hobbies that you can get into that will also be able to challenge you on a physical and mental level without perhaps having to go into that specific sport right now again. Doesn't mean that you can't do it down the line, but it's more about it's almost like getting those paddles out and jump starting you to say, okay, I want to get back in to doing that again. But where can I start just tomorrow, making a decision to get me back in alignment with doing something physical on that level? Whether it's going to your, local pool, your YMCA, and go, if you have a pool facility, going up to the top of that, going out for a swim and going up to the high dive and jumping off, just to kind of shake that up and feel that. What does that feel like again, to go to the edge and jump? Or even just to sit down and watch old clips of yourself. I mean, sometimes these things sound selfish, right? And when we're talking about connection to self, well, yeah, our actions when we're talking about ourselves are going to be selfish because we're connecting to ourselves. So these things are things that you need to do to bring awareness to yourself. Now, obviously, this, there's always going to be the extreme. No, this isn't about, pushing away your children and saying, no, mommy or daddy's going to sit and watch whatever they want for hours while your family sits there and suffers. Of course not. But there is this quality of perhaps you might just need to tell your family tonight that no, mommy or daddy's going to, have a little alone time, or needs to go, to the gym or the pool to have some physical time by themselves. It's okay to ask for time to yourself. It's okay to do that. And maybe it starts simply with you pulling up old videos of your last, parasailing trip or flight, or the last place you traveled to, and just getting reconnected on an emotional level. So I talk a lot about emotional connection. The more we tap into feeling into something, the more we actually can help manifest and bring that back into our awareness. And so for you, it might simply be just to go back and start to tap into that feeling of, okay, what did it feel like to fly? What did it feel like when I went to this new country? And then just to kind of sit and relive it, to remind yourself of being in that moment, of feeling that emotional connection, and of feeling that emotional connection specifically to yourself. Because you're only feeling your emotions. So you get a chance to connect to that experience again. And that's really what's going to help keep you And I think that's kind of where actually this is where the second part of this message for courage comes from, where it says, learn from the past with elephant spirit. That there's this component of going back to your past self, reconnecting with that sense of play, with something that you had loved, and really learning about yourself, learning about that part of yourself again from your current perspective. So that's the beauty of the fact that we continually grow, not only on a physical level, but also on an emotional and spiritual plane and a mental plane. But that we get a chance to go back and kind of, when we start to tap into parts of ourselves again that maybe it's been a while since we've tapped into, we can bring them forward into the present and now apply all the other experience we've had since then and all the other knowledge we've accumulated, and be able to have possibly a different and more heightened perspective of that experience. So maybe you're looking back at the last time you went, parasailing, and this might have been years ago, and you're realizing, wow, man, since then I've learned so much about the human body. I've learned so much about what I'm capable of as far as handling stress, even in the workplace. And now I see that and I think, gosh, I could, I limited myself for, in that hobby to only do X, Y, and Z. But now if I went back to it, oh my gosh, I have, contacts now that maybe would want to come with me. I, might be braver to, instead of just, sticking to this one place where I always went parasailing that was, very regulated. Maybe now I would love to take it up a notch. There's this element of being able to apply what you were doing then, that past version of self, to now, and then elevating it even further. And that's how we continue to grow parts of ourselves and continue to engage authentically without getting bored. So I think that that's really what you're kind of being told here to do, is to really tap into the wisdom of what Spirit's asking you to do, which is open yourself up to the broader picture again of your life in total, to really be able to see where you've kind of, hidden some aspect of yourself, but tabled some aspect of self because you weren't allowing yourself to really tap into play. And now, as you're taking action, to ask yourself to kind of think about your past version, and now where can you elevate as you tap back into this part of yourself? How can you elevate it now based off of everything you've learned since then? Okay, and for a final point for contemplation, which is the final principle in the Triad of Engagement, I'm going to pull a card for you here. And contemplation is important because it deals with connection. So where curiosity taps you into the awe and wonder of life and even within your own self, and courage taps you into faith, because you really have to, courage is based in faith. Faith that when you take that action, especially taking action on your own behalf, that you have faith that it will have a positive outcome. Faith that it will unlock some aspect of your place and purpose. And then we have contemplation. And contemplation is where we get to connect the dots between what we were curious about, where we decided to take action, and then we get to reflect on, okay, well, what were the consequences of that? What did I learn about myself through direct experience? In addition, now where can I grow? So contemplation is the seat really of our spiritual growth, spiritual and emotional growth. This is where we get a chance to prevent ourselves from falling into places of emotional stagnation or spiritual blindness, where we kind of continue to take the same actions, make the same mistakes, have the same consequences, but we're choosing not to use contemplation to be aware of it. All right, Virgo, so for contemplation and our final card for this reading, we have, you're already doing it. It says, stop overthinking, keep facing your true north. perfect. Stop overthinking, Virgo. Now I know, sorry, it's hard to tell a Virgo that. Most Virgos, so Virgo, you are ruled by Mercury. So you're ruled by thought and communication. And most, even though you are an earth sign, you tend to harness a lot of air sign energy because of that connection to Mercury. So oftentimes you can get kind of, I wouldn't say almost lost in thought and overthinking, but more lost in over-perfecting. And this can be, I wouldn't say dangerous, but it can be a self-limiting factor because you're constantly looking at what needs to be perfected first instead of just kind of letting loose to play. So what that can end up looking like is, well, I used to paraglide, but I was never that great at it. I wasn't perfect at it. It's like, it doesn't matter. Kids don't care when they're playing with Legos or when they're outside running around playing tag. They don't care if they're doing things perfectly. In fact, that's the whole purpose of play, right? Is that you're doing something that's engaging you because you're learning in the moment. You don't know how to do something perfectly. So if you were to take up a hobby like parasailing, that you would be a beginner for quite some time, and that you'd have to go out and do it again and again and again to be able to really start to get the hang of it. And that's what play is about. If let's say you were the person who traveled a lot, well, I'm sure you can think back to maybe a couple times when you were first starting to travel on your own where there was some element of disaster involved or learning. Maybe you missed a flight. Maybe you made the mistake and kept your wallet in your outside pocket and got pickpocketed. I mean, I know from my own past experiences in traveling, I experienced some of those where I just didn't listen or I just didn't know. And then once something happens, then you learn from that. Then you look back and say, oh yeah, now I know not to pack 5 giant suitcases on a whirlwind tour of 5 countries, or whatever you name it. Or to pack extra bottled water if you're going to some, specific country. Or, it's one of those things where you have to look back and not judge yourself so critically, but also not be afraid that because something doesn't seem perfect right now, that it's not still meant to be enjoyed. So I love that it says you're already doing it, meaning that Virgos out there, you are moving on the right path. But there's this element here of it's time to really feel that for yourself, to feel that again, that connection to I'm right where I need to be, but I need to have fun again. And this can actually look like maybe, now that I'm kind of getting this feeling for the whole totality, and this is something that only you can answer for yourself, but perhaps there's this quality of almost maybe recently you guys have tapped back into that part of yourself. Maybe you did go get a chance to travel, with everything kind of opening up for summer. Maybe you went and traveled again. But because some other aspect that you've been focusing on so much wasn't perfect, you didn't get the same feeling you got from when you previously used to engage and play in this specific area. So this could look like maybe you have a hobby. Maybe let's just say you picked up dancing at a certain point, and dancing was so fun. It was your release, and it was wonderful, and you just would get lost in it, and it was true play, and you were kind of pushing yourself to learn new dances and to go out there, and maybe you moved away from that a little bit because either A, you couldn't go into the studio that you used to go into because of the pandemic, or you just moved away from it because your life got a little bit busier and you didn't have the ability to, and then maybe recently you started to pick it back up. Okay, great. Now I have this opportunity to go back into my studio to dance, or to build something at home that I could be able to dance again. But because you've been so focused on some other aspect that wasn't coming out as perfectly as you had expected it to, that it colored your ability to achieve the same enjoyment out of this aspect of play. Now, this could look like, for instance, if you were so hyper-focused on your work and saving and saving and saving to travel, and then finally you got a chance to travel, but because you were so focused on work, you now have extra commitments, and you were traveling but checking your phone and your email every 2 minutes. And so instead of just getting lost in the pure joy of being in a new place, you were checking your phone, and you were worried about when you could sit down and actually type up the next email and a project that you would have finished before you left. And then this is where you've lost touch with the beauty that you needed to connect with. And I feel like that's kind of where you guys are at right now, that you've tried. So let's say it was dancing, and maybe you started dancing again, but because you have been so hyper-focused maybe on your family and other aspects of your life, that when you started to dance again, you started to feel guilty because it took you away from time with your family. So let's say, this is all COVID-based, the pandemic-based, then maybe your family really has become dependent on the fact that you were home all the time and didn't go to the studio to dance and didn't have this extra hobby. And now you have to tell them, no, it's mommy or daddy's day to go dance. But then when you go dance, instead of just getting lost in the dance and it's so freeing, you're worried that dinner isn't getting prepared exactly the way it should be, and that your kids might be missing you, and that your significant other might be stressed, and suddenly you've lost that beautiful connection to the freedom that you needed to feel from dance. And this is where contemplation comes in, to help you realize you're exactly where you need to be. You need to stop overthinking perfection, and to tap back into play, you're going to have to realize the bigger picture, that there's a reason why you loved to dance, and there's a reason why you loved to travel. So again, if let's say to dance was to be able to touch this place of freedom within yourself, or to travel was to be able to touch this element of beauty in the difference of, culture and the difference in the external environment that you get to see. Well, then what do you need to release in your current environment, your tie, your over-focus? What do you need to release to be able to tap back in to whatever that feeling or whatever whatever ability or need was filled originally by that state of play for you? And then start to focus there. So if freedom was what you needed to tap into through dance, but yet you're being held back by worrying about you being the perfect parent, let's say, and that's getting in the way, then this is the perfect place to start to bring awareness to, okay, I can release a little bit of the shame and guilt I feel around having to be this perfect parent, because you know what? I'm already doing it. I'm already a great parent. And part of being that great parent is tapping into the aspect of self that I need to, which is touching this place of freedom. And why is that important for me to tap into now? What is this feeling of freedom going to unlock for me and help me engage more authentically, both with my family and in my external environment? Same with traveling and finding a sense of beauty. What do I need to release from my hyperfixation on work to be able to refocus on finding something that unlocks that sense of beauty within myself. And once I start to do that, why is unlocking a sense of beauty so important to me? And this is when we start to look at ourselves like this is when we start to uncover layer after layer until we get down to that beautiful pearl that's within us. That pearl that is our purpose. That pearl that is our gift to give and share with the world. And that pearl that once we show it is also the element that will bring us that sense of emotional fulfillment. All right, Virgo, this was a really lovely reading. A lot longer than these usually are, but I'm glad I did it. And I really hope you guys do tap into play this month, that you get back in touch with whatever part of yourself has been kind of laying dormant for a while, and that you wake it up and you do so with a fresh perspective of almost looking at yourself like a plant that needs watering. That you've been denying yourself something and it's time to tap back in without feeling guilt, without feeling shame, without diving into that sense of perfection, and just go out and have some fun. All right, for anybody who would like to book a personal tarot reading or a one-on-one coaching session, the link to my website is in the description box below. I look forward to your other readings for the month. And for anybody who's looking to book a personal reading, if you do not see something that specifically relates to a reading that you're hoping to get, you can simply type in what you'd like the reading to focus on, and I will tailor your reading to that specific topic or area you'd like to have addressed. All right, bye my lovely Virgos.